Hi, everyone. Irit Eizips here for CSM Practice. Welcome to our podcast about customer success, best practices, actual experience coming in from veterans in this industry. And as you know, I love sharing tactical advice and what works for other organizations. And one of the aspects is important for a successful journey for our customers is how in customer success do we work with the professional services team. And I can tell you over the years, when I work with different professional services teams, every professional services team is actually responsible for something else. The team is comprised a little bit differently. But today I have one of the industry's veterans, Ilan Gendelman from Atlanta, 20 years of experience in professional services, in customer success, in many different organizations, including Splice Machines, HP Software, Cloudera, Sisense, and DBT Labs. Ilan, it's an honor to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Today, you wanted to focus on an interesting area, which is how do you scale professional services teams to achieve client outcomes with juxtaposition between taking customer success methodologies and merging them into how professional services teams should work with clients?
Yeah, exactly. So as you said, I have a lot of experience leading and scaling global professional services organization. And what I wanted to do is just share some of the lessons learned, some of the mistakes that I've made, and some of the things that I've found along the way. So hopefully it'll provide value to the viewers.
Before we dive into the topic, I also wanted to recommend to everyone, if you ever go check out blogs on medium.com, there's one blog that you wrote about customer success and professional services organizations, Never Stop Training, where you share a lot of advice on how to train the teams on different skill sets to amplify the way that they work with customers. And I just love how passionate you are about incorporating customer success into professional services methodologies.
I always say that customer success and professional services is a team sport. You can't do it alone. Everybody has to be on the same boat, rowing ideally to the same direction. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So Ilan, let's start at the beginning. There's going to be a lot of professional services executives watching, heads of customer success that own professional services here. Let's talk about how do you approach building a scalable professional services organization?
So I found that there are 5 ingredients to building a world-class professional services organization. And these are culture, collaboration, processes, tools, systems. And I think one of the most important elements is customer empathy. Now, people think culture, what does that mean? And I took a step back and thought about what really makes a world-class culture. And the first thing that comes to mind is the mission. What is the mission of the professional services organization? So is it to make money? Is it to achieve bookings, billings, margin, utilization, all the other KPIs that we love so much? And I would venture to say, no, that's not an inspiring mission. So obvious question is, what is the mission of a professional services organization? In my mind, it is to accelerate tangible outcomes for customers. I work in software companies, so I'm going to focus on with the software platform. That can be SaaS, PaaS, etc. But professional services, in my mind, is the turbo button to get outcomes. And that's super important because that, I found, formulates the mission of professional services, not just vis-a-vis customers, but also vis-a-vis other organizations in the company, customer success, engineering, sales, product.
I think what you're saying is that the mission is twofold. There's one part of the mission that's targeted to customers. Interested that you use the word tangible outcomes versus maybe desired business outcomes. So I wanted to ask if that was intentional or not. The second part of the mission is also to add value to other teams. So can you double click on why tangible outcomes versus desired business outcome? Do you think there's a difference in how customer success operates versus how professional services operates?
That's a good distinction. So I would think that tangible outcomes and business outcomes are pretty much one and the same because any software is bought to achieve a specific business outcome. I call it tangible because it has to be usable. So we've all heard about the MVP concept, the minimal viable product. There's another concept that I like. It's called SLC, which is simple, lovable, and complete. So as long as we can get to a simple, lovable, and complete use case, and the customer sees value from the product and software as quickly as possible, then there's a foundation for expansion, for growth, referenceability, et cetera. So I think we're really aligned.
I almost want to double click on this SLC. It's actually really cool. I love acronyms. Is that valid for first value delivered, or would you say that that's also valid for secondary and third use cases and outcomes that you can deliver to clients?
Yeah, SLC is really meant for the first use case. And the concept of the SLC is to address some of the challenges in the MVP framework. So MVP is minimal viable product. And over time, I found too, based on my own experience, is that the focus is on the minimal, but not so much on the viable and maybe not so much on the product. But having a simple, lovable, and complete means we're going to target a simple use case. And that could be a small feature. It has to be lovable. The experience has to be amazing. That's super true in the world of SaaS, and has to be complete. It should be able to be used start to finish. And again, very simple, very small use case. So when I implemented SLC in the organizations that I've led, we saw real traction with how customers saw the outcomes and perceived the outcome of the engagement.
So let's double click on lovable. When your professional services team finish an implementation of either an add-on service or a first value delivered, how do they gauge for lovable? Obviously, I also heard like a wow moment or first moment of value recognized, but how does your team captures that? And by the way, as the professional services executive, do you hold them accountable to checking off simple, lovable, and complete? And if it's not lovable, do you allow them to add additional hours to the scope and potentially bleed on scope until the client actually loves it?
I think the first step in the SLC framework is actually to scope out what simple is and agree on what that looks like. Identifying and agreeing ahead of time as much as possible what that simple, lovable means and how to measure lovable would be key. Because I think one of the biggest challenges is that Bob loves it and Cheryl doesn't. Does that mean it's a success or it's not a success? But having a measurable definition of what lovable is, that the experience and how that would look like, super important. You asked how the team measures it. And frankly, it's good old surveys and discussions with customers. And I think the key is to measure that along the journey and not wait until the end. Because when you wait until the end and you have this ta-da moment, for example, when you bake a cake and you serve it and some people like it, some people don't. The advantage of software building is that you can test while the cake is still in the oven. It's still baking. Measure along the way. If you see that you're going off track, obviously we can go back and change the scope. That could add additional hours, additional cost, or in certain cases, the company can decide to do this pro bono due to other considerations. But the goal is to measure along the way. And I like surprises. I don't like surprises at the end of engagements. You want to find out ideally early if it's on track or if it veers off track and you need to course correct.
All of that is related to culture, or like really how we want the team to think. And so designing that for really being inquisitive and having a mission in mind that we want to build something that's simple, lovable, and complete with every professional services engagement is a really nice mission to have. The second part of that mission that you mentioned was the ability to add value to other teams.
Professional services and customer success are a team sport. Professional services is in the unique position to provide insight into other organizations. What do I mean by that? Insight to the customer success team about how the product is used. Does the customer use it as intended? Is there an adoption? Is there an uptick in usage? That's measurable, really important information to provide to customer success. To the engineering and product teams, how the product is being used. Are there any feature requests that should be provided? How they should be prioritized? For example, you can design a fantastic product and the customer looks at it and uses it a completely different way. That's gold. That's information that should be provided to the product engineering teams. Support. I found, again, based on my work in early stage companies, is that the lines between support and professional services are sometimes blurry, which is support is doing professional services, and professional services is doing support. When you have an early stage startup, it's okay. But as you grow up and you go to the Series C, Series D, you really want to put a stop to that. So providing that roles of responsibility in PS and support is absolutely key. Also, that's really, really important. And I've done this in several of the companies that I led professional services in, which is after each engagement, the professional services team documents everything that the team has done in a runbook and provides that to support. So the support team knows exactly what has been done in the implementation. People have so much knowledge in their heads, but if they don't document it, that knowledge goes away because time passes, people forget, they leave, and a lot of the organizational knowledge just dissipates. How to resolve that? By documenting. And now documenting is not the exciting activity, I'll admit, but it's super important. So professional services documenting engagements in a runbook provides the support in a central location. I can take a look at 18 months ago, 24 months ago, and see what has been done for customer X. That's amazing. How simple is that? But you'd be surprised how many companies don't implement it. So document.
You encourage the team to then put it in a central repository, and that is accessible to the support team, but probably also in today's age to the customer success team. What other teams do you benefit in professional services? You talked about the product team, support. Who else?
Sales. Think of professional services as the eyes and ears of the sales organization with the customer, either on site or virtually. And I see the role of professional services not just to implement the use case. For example, we identify the use case that you have to implement A, B, C, and D, and you do it and you leave. That's okay. But in order to take it a step further, identifying additional use cases and bringing sales to the table and building new capabilities and new insights in the account, that's gold. So I call it the PS sales flywheel, which is the sales team involves professional services early in the sales cycle and scope engagements and start engagements and end them successfully, make customers referenceable, because that's gold to the sales team and the sales process. How cool is that? The sales rep can say, you know what, Mr. Customer, we've done this for another customer in your vertical, and here's a use case, and here's a success story. That's amazing. Sales and PS are really tied at the hip, should be.
And I would say also customer success, right? Because they should understand, what did professional services implement? What kind of like cool stuff have they done for other clients that we can recommend new clients or existing clients that have never opted into it before, and we know what kind of success it can bring to the table.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And collaboration, just to say, like all of this is part of that, one of the pillars for building a scalable professional services team, which is the culture. We talked about the mission. Now we're talking about collaboration, which was the second element. And you talked about product, sales, support. You also have like marketing and potentially HR as other groups that you can collaborate with.
Yeah, marketing. Professional services ideally will collaborate with marketing on the success stories. So I think we've all seen in those companies with websites, and they share the value of the product and the use case, but there are not a lot of success stories. Yeah. The one thing I found that provides the most credibility in the sales cycle are success stories, and more important than that, referenceable customers. And that's where marketing and professional services can collaborate. After each successful engagement, I ask my PS team to document a success story. That could be a very short template, 1, 2, 3 slides, because you have to extract the core of the engagement. What was the issue? What was the challenge? What did the team do? What was the outcome? And that has to be measurable, but provide that in an easy to consume way through marketing. That can be a joint YouTube video or a joint press release or a podcast. Really, really valuable. I would really recommend to spend time on that and collaborate with the marketing team. The last one is HR. And first thought, why does HR need to be involved? And the reason for that is training in career path. The professional services team needs to be trained like any other team. That's true for customer success, sales engineering, etc. So training is not a one-time deal, right? Just when you try to get into shape, right? You want to run a marathon. If you run 5 miles once, you probably can't run a marathon. In order to do that, you need to train again and again and again with different degrees of intensity. The same principle applies to professional services, I found. So when I worked in a Series D company, I essentially built a training program for my team That included both technical training and soft skills.
Mm.
Professional services is unique in the sense that the team typically has to be very, very technical, but also customer facing and how to deal with customers and changing priorities, politics, personalities, etc. And there are a lot of great training books on this and classes that the team can take. In today's world, super easy. It's online, really important. The last element is the career path.
With regards to training, you actually created that whole blog that I just mentioned to really hone in on training opportunities for both your team in professional services that are also applicable for customer success teams. And in that blog, you really specify a lot of soft skill training like communication skills, management skills, and presentation skills. Do you feel that these trainings should actually be done for multiple teams in the company at the same time for scalability perspectives?
Absolutely. Customer-facing organization, customer success, support, professional services, etc., need to have excellent communication skills, presentation skills. In today's world, in Zoom, we all present all the time. So having that training is really, really important.
Yeah, I spoke with a number of executives and everybody says that after you do some skill set training, doing role plays on a consistent basis is super powerful and really taking their team to the next level. So I totally echo what you just said. There was another aspect that you thought you have experienced really being impactful in the ability to scale your team by collaborating with HR, and that's on career pathing for professional services that worked on your team. Can you share a little bit about that? What did it entail? How did you structure it? Did you have any challenges doing so?
So in one of the companies that I worked for, when I joined the professional services team, everybody had the same role, a TAM role, technical account manager. And what it would really mean is that they did everything. They did project management and technical consulting and support tickets, therapists if they needed to, but there was no career path, how to move from a TAM role to any other role. So I work with my leadership team and with HR to build a career path, a career ladder of what does it mean to be an entry level, a senior level, architect level, principal level. And in order to jump from one level to the other, those jumps have to be measurable. It cannot be subjective. The worst thing is that if you promote somebody without merit, that causes a lot of concern across the board. So working closely with HR and with my own leadership team in order to figure out exactly what does it mean to move from a senior level to a principal level and how to justify it, really, really important. And HR plays such a key role in that because they have tons of experience and can really provide guidance to leaders who certainly do this for the first time.
I had another interview on my YouTube channel with Miranda Dekonsky, who is a powerful thought leader in customer success, but she has deep expertise in HR as well. So it happens. And one of the things that she mentioned is that not everybody wants to be a manager. Some people actually likes having a horizontal career path. So the way she structures her career path and discusses it with her customer success team is, what are your choices? Can you move horizontally within the organization to other teams, to other positions within the team? Or can you move up? That's what you want to do. What skills do you need to improve on as you go from junior to senior to team leader to director to an executive?
Yeah, totally. Some people are very content staying at the IC level, individual contributor. Some want to move to management. I'm a huge believer in giving people an opportunity, if they choose, to go to a manager role, but to provide the guidance and the mentorship that requires it. Most of us, myself included, started at the IC level and took a chance and moved to a manager role and needed a lot of guidance and mentorship. So I think that's also one of the key responsibilities of a leadership team in any organization, professional services, customer success, is to build that program and promote from within. And in fact, one of the best managers that I work with started as an individual contributor and she changed to a manager role and she was amazing. So give people the opportunity to excel, mentor them along the way. In some cases, you'll be surprised. It'll be amazing.
Your framework to building a scalable professional services team was culture, which is the vision, the mission, collaboration. How do we work with other team members, including HR? And then the other three were processes, tools and systems, and culture of empathy, or customer empathy, I should say. Tell me a
Right.
little bit about processes. What kind of processes do you recommend starting with in terms of definition? What are the first processes you would recommend a new professional services executives to start defining right off the bat if they don't have anything defined or documented yet?
There are a lot of ways to cut that cake, but I'm a big believer in starting from the top of the funnel. So when I led really early stage professional services teams, I worked very closely with the customer success organization, the sales organization, to put together go-to-market offerings for professional services. And those can be really simple. A lot of companies call them quick starts or jump starts or onboarding. Again, going back to the SLC, the small or simple, lovable, and complete, get customers to results within 2, 3, 4 weeks. And work closely with the sales team, enable them on professional services, going back to the mission, embed in the sales cycle early enough, and work with the sales team to sell professional services. If this is not done or not done well, the top of the funnel that brings work in, by work I mean implementations, everything else will be a lot more difficult.
Okay, so step number one, define your packages, keeping it simple, lovable, and complete, top of mind. And once you define the package and what it includes, what are the next steps?
Yeah, so include that in the sales cycle, and we can go to CRM and include that as a SKU. But after that's being sold, in a lot of ways, that's the easy part. In parallel, there has to be an enablement of the professional services team, how to implement it. Because we can sell a project to do something amazing, but if the team doesn't have the capability to do it, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So in parallel to building that sales pipeline, work with the professional services team, build the collateral and the templates to deliver engagements in a consistent way. In the beginning, it might be a little bit difficult because every engagement is going to be slightly different. Every customer is different. Every use case is different. But over time, building those templates and capabilities pay off because it'll become, in a way, delivery machine. It'll be predictable to a point. It'll be consistent. The quality will be high. Customer sat will be high. These are the first two processes that I would highly recommend to focus on.
Which leads us to the third phase, which is the ability of the professional services team to be predictable in terms of forecasting revenues coming in from professional services engagement to even impacting a customer renewability or a health score, some companies like to call it, to say, hey, what do we think is the propensity of this client to actually renew versus churn in year one?
If something is important, it's worth measuring it. So having those processes and be able to forecast bookings and billings and margin utilization, customer sat, will the projects go over budget, under budget, ahead of schedule, behind schedule, and do that on an ongoing basis. Small companies that I've worked on use Excel or Google Sheets, can do amazing things. But as you grow, there are really good systems out there that can do this extremely well. So I would recommend to take a look at that.
Like PSA systems, or do you actually think about like forecasting solutions?
Yeah, PSAs. There are a lot of good PSAs out there in the market, and in PSA, you can do everything pretty well, including forecasting. I can also use your CRM to do that. Once a professional service organization gets to the 30-member threshold, usually it's a good idea to start thinking about a PSA implementation. If you have 15, 20 people, you can still use a spreadsheet and do okay. But after you get to 30, start looking at a PSA.
So up to 30, you could use Google Sheets, you could use Monday.com maybe. But then after that, it gets a little complicated because not only do you need to forecast the services, the projects, but you also need to start collaborating with sales to understand the pipeline and make sure you're staffing appropriately.
That's absolutely true. One of the challenges, of course, is after you sell an engagement and you know how to execute it is, when can you start? I mean, that's the first question that the customer will ask. Okay, when can you start? Can you start on Monday? I've been in a few situations which I said, I'll get back to you. You don't want to do that. Having a PSA with resource forecasting capabilities, or even a spreadsheet or Monday or any other solution out there, to be able to look ahead and see what the workload looks like in the next 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, and then come back to the customer and say, hey, Mr. Customer, we can start in a week or 2 or 3. That brings so much confidence to the process and helps start the engagement on the right foot.
Which brings me to the fourth pillar or building block in building a scalable professional services team is the use of technology. Another aspect that why companies opt into having a tech stack for professional services teams is the ability to elevate the customer experience while they're going through a professional services engagement, whether it's implementation or additional customization or scripting or whatever the case might be. So almost like, how do you project manage those engagements and potentially having a customer portal? What do you think about that? What is your approach for building a tech stack for professional services teams?
I'm a huge believer in customers looking at the project status at any point in time and seeing where things are. And a lot of tools out there allow that. I want to touch a little bit about project management. I've been in early stage companies in which there was no project management. The consultants, the technical team did their own project management. That's a challenge. Most technical folks, not all, but most, do not like to do project management. And we're not trained to do project management. Having dedicated project managers that can control the scope and the cost and the schedule and how to deal with changes, that takes skill. So going back to the early stage professional services team, once you get to the 20, 30 member mark, I would highly recommend to start thinking about hiring dedicated project managers. And a good project manager can manage 4 to 6 or even 7 engagements at the same time, and they can make a difference in terms of ensuring the success of the project. And a good PSA has project management capabilities, so you don't need to buy another software. If you only want to do small or even complex Gantt charts, there are tools for that too. A lot of options out there. We are so blessed to have so many tools out there that we can use, and a lot of them are good.
Excellent point. By the way, from experience, because I did manage a bunch of software implementations and acted not only as the project manager, but like a solution architect. And I can tell you, there's so much a great project manager can do. You're saying 8 projects. I was like, wow, that's a lot. It must be small, simple scope.
If you do SLCs, you can do probably 6 to 7, but big ones, 1 or 2 will take your entire week.
Exactly. I don't care how good you are, because you need to give the customers the attention. And really, by increasing the workload or how many things you need to manage, there's just more opportunities for errors or mistakes or bad customer experience or poor customer experience, we should say. How do you leverage technology to elevate customer experience, scale, create transparency, collaboration, flag risks?
A lot of it, to be honest with you, is automation. If we need to rely on manual dashboards or look at a report in Salesforce, inevitably things will be missed. But going back to the tech, a lot of great tools out there that allow you to automate tasks, and the system can alert the team, alert leadership, alert customer success. Hey, look here, things will require attention. For example, in support, if a support ticket with a severity 1, which is a high severity, doesn't get attention after X number of days, you want to know about it. If a project did not change status in over a week or 2 weeks, you want to know about it. If there's a customer call that didn't go well, those calls are now recorded and transcribed, and you know what's going on. A lot of tools out there that allow you to find specific keywords and alerts. So automation and proactive alerts by systems, by tech, is really, really important. We're also busy during the day with a lot of competing priorities and escalations, and stuff happens, life happens. So having tech that pushes the relevant information to us is really, really important. So realize the need to do manual work and let me look at that dashboard again, because we miss things. We're human.
So would you say the path to full maturity of the tech stack for professional services teams looks kind of like this? You start with Google Sheets or Excel, and then you maybe graduate to Monday.com and some BI solution and integrate with Salesforce. And then you graduate to a PSA solution. And by the way, I want to question the fact that you said you have to have 20 to 30 employees in your professional services teams. Could another factor be how many engagements you're actually running? Because you might have like 10 team members with 50 small engagements, and that's also overwhelming.
That's a great distinction. Looking at this again, the volume of the work compared to the number of the people in the team is absolutely important. I also want to mention that PSAs typically take a few months to implement it. It's not a simple solution. It requires a lot of integration with the CRM and the processes, and every company is a little bit different. So I found when I implemented a PSA that it took about 3 to 4 months to implement it, and then it took about 2 to 3 months to get used to it, absorb it in daily operations. So it's an endeavor, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And so if anybody's watching here and is kind of like at the cusp of thinking, yeah, we should probably have some solutions for him to manage our implementations better. I actually interviewed Bill Daffett about a year ago around the whole process of vetting out what should the systems be, what problems they're going to solve, how are they going to approach the implementation. And I think he did that for like 2-3 months. He just did an assessment on the technology he needed before he even purchased a solution. And then when they did, they actually hit the ground running. They already knew what are their quick wins, home runs, and things that they're going to do in phase 2 and phase 3. So go check out that video if you like. In your recommended tech stack, you have more than just PSA and BI solutions. You actually have things like success stories and code repository. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that's not on everybody's radar.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with code repository. I come from a very technical background. So the professional services implementations that my teams have done were around big data, around analytics, machine learning, et cetera. So very code heavy. Now, it's very easy to everybody in the team to have their own Git repository or whatever solution you're using, but that does not promote reuse. Having a single code repository for professional services, team members can take a look and say, okay, has anybody else done this use case? And it has to be well documented, by the way. Increases the delivery velocity, increases quality, increases learning. I mean, there's no downside. It's all good. Check, check, check. So having a code repository is absolutely critical to the scalability of the professional services team and ensure faster delivery.
You have a tool specifically in mind that you have used maybe in a couple of organizations that you worked with. This is kind of like your go-to at this point.
Oh yeah, GitHub.
GitHub. The other thing that you mentioned is success stories and customer success platforms. I think those two I was not expecting to find. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
One of the challenges that I found when working alongside customer success in a professional services capacity is that there was no really one place to look at customer 360, understand what happens with the customer. You have to go to multiple systems. You have to go to the customer success platform. You have to go to the PSA. You have to go to Salesforce. You have to go to maybe another repository like Notion or Google Docs, what have you. So that's a problem. That's challenging. When this happens, the information gets lost. And of course, it has to be updated all the time and not be stale. So integrating the PSA with the customer success platform is super important. So for example, when I look at customer X, I can then obviously look at all the customer success metrics and see where things are, when the renewal is and usage and adoption and all that good stuff. But I also want to see what the status of the engagement was. When was the last project? What was the outcome, et cetera? So having all this integrated is important. And then you don't necessarily need to send a Slack to Bill from the PS team, tell me about this. So a lot of those solutions are readily available in the market. Highly recommend to take a look at that. It saves so much time to have the ability to have one single source of truth for customer status.
I think the last building block in building a professional services team that's scalable was customer empathy. Why did you include that blog and what does that mean to you?
Customer success, professional services is hard. Some days are amazing and some days are difficult with challenges and problems and implementations and escalations, and the list goes on and on. It's really easy. I experienced this too firsthand, just to focus on the here and now and just look at the current issue and try to solve it. But I found that it's really useful to take a step back and look at the situation from the customer perspective. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. What do I mean by that? The customer purchased the platform, subscription or purchased the software, and they were hoping, maybe sometimes betting their career on ensuring that the use case is successful. So looking at the lens through their eyes, that the chance that they took on the platform, certainly if you're an early stage company, means the world, because that allows you to see the bigger picture, elevate between where you currently are the current issue, the current challenge, the current problem, and look from a high ground over what's going on. So customer empathy is everything. When there are difficult decisions to be made, we've all had them. What to do? Every solution has a different course of action to take. I always found that when I look at it through the customer lens and thinking of the customer first and what's good for the customer, helped clarify the decision process and then hopefully made the right decision.
Love that. I really hope that's one of the key takeaways for anybody that's watching that manages professional services. Embrace this customer centricity and think outside the box. How can they incorporate additional methodologies and training for their teams? Think from customer outcomes perspective. What are some key takeaways and lessons learned that you would like to share with professional services executives that might be watching this video?
I think the first one is take it one day at a time. It's a journey and it's hard. Some days are easy and amazing and everything just works. Other days are difficult. Just take it one day at a time. And that also goes with having patience and empathy. Empathy, of course, to the customer, but also for your team. A lot of them are new in their careers. They have a lot of competing priorities. They have challenges too. And I look at it from a PS leader perspective, which is my job is to help them do their best job and make sure that they have the best experience doing it and helping wherever I can. So taking a breath, step back, detach, look at the situation and do the best I can and also enjoying the journey. And it is a journey. And the last one is to have fun.
Well, there you go. The 5 pillars or building blocks for setting up a scalable professional services team with a key mindset to delivering outcomes for customers in a manner that's simple, lovable, and complete. I want to appreciate you for coming into our channel, to our podcast, and sharing your experience and expertise in this matter. I don't think we had a lot of conversations about this topic, and it's super important because as the methodologies of customer success continue to evolve, we do see this as a company-wide initiative and something that every team should bear in mind. And this is an evolution for everyone in the company, not just customer success teams. And I appreciate you for coming in and sharing your perspectives around that topic.
Thanks so much. I had a blast.
If you enjoyed this interview, go check out his blogs on medium.com. Look out for Ilan Gendelman. With that, it's a wrap. I will see you at the next podcast.